Hello and welcome to Inner Fortitude with Isis. I'm your host Isis Byrne, and I want to thank you for joining me on this very important topic. I was initially going to start with a self-confidence episode, and the more I started to prepare for that conversation, the more I realized that you can't have self-confidence until you've kind of tackled self-esteem. And so I'm going to do this in the right order. I think that confidence is something that comes naturally once you have more self-esteem, but there are still other components to it. And so in a nutshell, confidence has two parts. There's the internal, like the self-confidence that you feel inside that you have the ability to do things. And it has the external component where you are exuding or projecting a certain image of yourself. That is confidence. And so you can actually exude confidence and not actually feel it internally. So in an effort to try to get the message about self-confidence out, I think that it's really, really important to start at the very core of where it comes from. Where does the confidence actually come from? And it isn't just from knowing a certain skill really well. It's about believing in yourself and knowing that you are capable and knowing that you are worthy. And those two things don't come naturally to somebody who has low self-esteem. And so I think that I would be doing it an injustice if I just started by giving tips on how to act like you're confident without actually tackling the root cause of why you lack the confidence in the first place. So I'm going to start with self-esteem. And I know that this is a sensitive subject for a lot of people. I don't know anyone who started out in life having really high self-esteem their entire lives, and it just continued throughout adulthood. I think that we have varying degrees of issues with our own self-esteem during various times in our lives. And I think that to kind of maintain and keep yourself in perspective, the amount of self-esteem that you have on any given day or any given moment is a conscious decision and a conscious awareness of how we feel about ourselves. And I'm going to begin with the definition of what self-esteem is. Self-esteem is defined as the disposition to experience oneself as competent to cope with the basic challenges of life. That's the first part. And as worthy of happiness. And that's the second part. So in the first part of that self-esteem definition, it starts talking about sort of the self-efficacy, right? The ability for us to feel like we are able to cope with whatever life throws our way, that we're going to be okay no matter what. And so that's the first part of self-esteem. The second part of self-esteem is that worthiness factor. And if you feel that you are worthy of happiness, worthy of being treated well by other people, worthy of success, then that means that you have a semblance of self-respect. Because if you hold yourself in high esteem, the respect comes naturally. You respect yourself and won't tolerate this bad behavior or this, this second class deliverance of life. You will want to be the best version of yourself and feel like you earned it, and you're going to feel that you deserve more out of life because you know how great you are. You know how special you are and how unique, and you accept yourself exactly the way that you are, and you know that you are worthy. And so you will respect yourself naturally. And so that is self-esteem. Somebody with low self-esteem is going to feel like, kind of feel like a victim all the time. Like life just, it happens, and, things always end up badly for me. That's just the way that it is. These people that have resigned themselves to, not feeling like they are worthy of this happiness or this love. And that comes from a deep place in your past usually. It comes internally. this belief that you don't have what it takes. You don't have the ability to cope with life, or the or the worthiness to accept it, even if it slapped you in the face. And so low self-esteem is kind of the root of a lot of the self-doubt and the lack of confidence that a lot of people have. And so somebody with high self-esteem would have that opposite effect. They would feel super good about, hey, if life throws some lemons my way, I will make lemonade. I have what it takes to get past this. I accept and love myself exactly the way that I am, and I deserve better. I deserve to have a good life. I deserve to be treated well by other people. I deserve an opportunity to prove myself. That is what somebody with high self-esteem would have. And confidence, while it doesn't immediately come naturally even to somebody with high self-esteem, it comes more easily, because you know that when life throws crazy things your way, you'll manage either way. Do you act with confidence? Maybe not always, but you also know that those times that you do take a chance, you're going to be fine. So now that we know what self-esteem is, now that we've defined it in the way that it should be defined, self-esteem being that ability to cope with life, knowing inherently that you have that ability to deal with it, and also knowing that you are worthy of happiness, success, love, affection, appreciation, and success in any way, shape, or form. That is respect, or that is self-esteem. How do we deal with it if I don't have? What if I have low self-esteem? You find yourself looking yourself in the mirror, hating what you see, feeling like you're not smart enough, you're not successful enough, you're not good enough in a million different ways. And if you catch yourself having those feelings, inherently, that that's a lack of self-esteem. What does that look like, and how does it sort of manifest in your life? Somebody with low self-esteem is going to struggle to finish what they started. The self-doubt and that that little voice inside your head that says you can't or you're not worthy will start to creep in, and you don't actually finish what you start. So believe it or not, that is a sign that you have low self-esteem, when you don't finish what you set out to do. An indecision about simple choices. Even things like, and I'm sure that you've heard of this, what to eat for dinner. And you can never decide. It just takes you forever to make the simplest decisions. It's actually a sign of low self-esteem. If you attribute your success to luck, when people go, wow, how did you get to where you are? And you respond with, oh, I just got lucky. I was in the right place at the right time. Oh, I guess I'm just blessed. When you don't take accountability or responsibility for how far you've come and how hard you worked to get there, it's a sign of low self-esteem when you just say oh yeah, I just happen to be at the right place at the right time. And oh, I don't know why, but these things just happen to me. I'm lucky, I guess. It's a sign of low self-esteem. If you catch yourself feeling like impressing other people is really important to you, what people think matters a lot to you, that is a sign of low self-esteem. If receiving compliments from people makes you uncomfortable, you don't know what to do with it when somebody gives you a compliment, you just kind of go, oh yeah, no, this whole shirt, oh, this thing, yeah, okay. And you don't know what to do, it is a sign of low self-esteem. If you're hesitating to just say thank you and accepting the compliment. You don't handle failures well. You actually take them personally. So if you take a chance and you worked on something and it didn't go as well as you expected it to, if you give up and you kind of feel like, God, I'm such a loser. I made that mistake. Why did I do that? I'm out of my league. I shouldn't try again. If you catch yourself having those thoughts when you fail, you take it so personally. It keeps you up at night. and it haunts you and you replay the story in your head, that is a sign of low self-esteem. If you have trouble, and you struggle to speak up for yourself, for your needs and your wants and your beliefs, if you have a hard time speaking up for yourself, that is also a sign of low self-esteem. Somebody with high self-esteem will not have a problem saying, these are my needs and they need to be met. This is something that's important to me, and asserting themselves with that. If you are actively trying to avoid conflicts with other people, you're like, you know what? No, I'm extremely selective. Conflicts freak me out. I run the other direction. If you actively avoid conflicts on a regular basis, it's a sign that you lack self-esteem. If you are afraid to contribute your opinion to other people, in conversations where people are talking about something and you have an opinion, but you're always hesitating to share it, that's a sign of low self-esteem. And the last one, if you take criticism personally, that is a sign that you have low self-esteem. Somebody telling you, hey, I noticed that you did XYZ. I think that you need to work on that. If you take that personally instead of taking the lesson for what it's worth, because someone with high self-esteem, if they got some constructive criticism from somebody else, they would take the lesson and not internalize it as saying, what's wrong with me? But they would rather say, oh, well, thank you for sharing that with me. I'll work on that. I'll do better. Because they'll see that as an opportunity to improve themselves if they believe that it's something that they can improve. But they won't take it personally. If you have low self-esteem, if this checklist has somehow opened your eyes to the idea or the realization that you have low self-esteem, the very first thing that I want you to do is, acknowledge it, and don't think that it can't be fixed, because it can. It can 100% be fixed. Low self-esteem is not something that you're born with it and it's just a part of who you are for the rest of your life. It's not. It's actually taught throughout your life. Whether it was one person, whether it was other people that did it, whether it was yourself that did it, your self-esteem can actually change. Your level of self-esteem can change throughout your life. And there are things that you can do to improve it. So first, don't be afraid of the fact that you might have low self-esteem. The first thing that you need to do in order to fix a problem is to acknowledge that you have it. And so if you know that you have low self-esteem, tackle it. Decide to fix it, because you can. Don't blame yourself, okay? Just because you have low self-esteem, even if it was self-inflicted, even if you start, when you do the homework, which we're about to talk about in a minute, once you do the homework, if you start to realize that you may have been the biggest factor in getting yourself to that rock bottom in self-esteem, don't blame yourself. Do not shame yourself. Don't sit there and go, well, see, this is just another reason why. Everyone has triggers in their lives that form some of the thoughts and the beliefs that we have about ourselves internally. It is perfectly okay to have some beliefs about ourselves up and down throughout our lives. But the most important thing is that you have now acknowledged that you, A, have the problem, B, you can fix it, but you do have to sort of come back to the basics and understanding where it came from in the first place, so that you can then reshape the beliefs that you have built through time, or that other people have inflicted on you with time. So don't be afraid of it, okay? Don't be afraid to sit with your emotions. I think that emotions play such a big part in everyday decision making that it cannot go without saying. Recognize that emotions are not a problem. There are no good or bad emotions. Emotions just are. They are signals that our bodies are trying to tell us, pay attention to this or do something about it. Once you start to see your emotions as allies, instead of seeing them as bad and evil and you need to go hide from them, you can actually start to make changes in your life. You can learn from some of those experiences by observing those emotions and understanding what they're trying to tell you. Emotions are always trying to tell you something. And so the very last thing you should do is go hide from them. Don't hide from them. If you're feeling sad, let yourself feel sad and observe that emotion. If you're feeling angry, allow yourself to be angry, to feel the anger, and then observe the emotion. That is the right way to start processing those emotions. Emotions actually don't last forever. Did you know that? They don't. Emotions actually last less than an hour. And if you let yourself feel that one emotion, the only thing that can trigger it to happen again is avoiding processing them. And I know, mind blown. What do you mean I don't have to feel these emotions? So when you start to feel bad about yourself and you trigger those emotions of sadness and of shame and guilt and everything else that comes along with those negative emotions, it's because you've played some sort of story in your head about yourself and it's triggering other emotions. And so you can hit the, rewind, play back, rewind, play back, rewind, play back. And of course, if you're replaying the same stories over and over and over again, you're triggering emotions over and over and over again. Our brains don't actually know the difference between what you're thinking, the story that we're playing in our heads, and what is actually happening right now to you. It has no idea what the difference is, which is why when we tell ourselves these stories over and over and over again about ourselves, our emotions kick in. Our mind goes, "Oh, this is a sad moment. I'm gonna produce negative feelings." Oh, anger. I'm gonna raise your heart rate. I'm going to make you clench your fists. So your body will actually react to the stories that you replay in your head. That's important to know when we're talking about just about every subject I ever talk about in my podcast. Knowing that that's how emotions work. Emotions happen when it identifies a trigger or an event. They immediately happen. And then the feelings come, right, sometimes they lead to moods, and sometimes they lead to conditions. The mood starts to lead to a disorder because we have replayed things over and over and over again. And we tell ourselves a certain story and our body responds to the story as if it's happening all over again in real life. And that's why oftentimes an emotion turns into a feeling, the feeling turns into a mood, and the mood turns into a disorder. And so that's sort of the intensity or the length of time is actually the difference between them. You can get these really intense emotions one time and let it go, or you can hold on to it, build a story, and just re-trigger it over and over again, which leads to a mood. Or you can continually do that and the mood just expands for such a long period of time that it actually becomes a disorder that in some cases requires therapy and even medication sometimes. So back to our self-esteem subject, don't blame yourself. Don't be afraid of your feelings. Don't be afraid of the emotions that come out when you start to identify that the self-esteem or the level of self-esteem that you have might be linked to some of the experiences that you've had in the past, and maybe even some of the stories that you just keep telling yourself. Maybe because of the way you see yourself in the mirror, or the way that you compare yourself to other people, the way that you feel that other people might perceive you in public. And it can be fixed. This is not something that you have to live with for the rest of your life. You don't. You can actually fix it no matter what. No matter what you look like, no matter how successful your career has been up until this point, no matter where you are financially, no matter where you are in your region and your life, and no matter what situation, your self-esteem can be improved. So the very first thing that is recommended in order to tackle self-esteem is to understand where it came from, right? I mentioned that we're going to be exploring some of our past to find out where that came from. And oftentimes what happens with us is that a specific event may have happened, maybe one, maybe a couple, maybe more than that have happened, and it taught us or trained us to have a certain belief about ourselves. It isn't because, and it could have been something that somebody else said. It could have been a conversation that you had. It could have been an observation that you made. It could have been a belief in your culture that I'm supposed to be farther along, or I'm supposed to look a certain way, or somebody told you something. So you have these different factors that could have been playing a part in the opinion that you ultimately choose to believe about yourself. But know that even if someone told you, even if an observation was made, even if all of these different events may have happened that you felt is evidence for you to base that belief on, none of them are true. Because self-esteem comes from inside. And all of the things that you have experienced in your life up until this point were based on a belief system that you can wipe out starting effective immediately. They don't exist. The idea of where you should be is a myth. You should not be anywhere but where you are right now. The idea that you are not attractive. The word ugly, the ugliness does not exist. It's actually fabricated. Cultures have created their own versions of what is attractive from the beginning of time. And just because the media or the movies or whatever has based this has formed this sort of, this is what is supposed, people are supposed to look like, and you've started to believe that, doesn't mean that you can't stop, that you can't unteach yourself to believe that. They're not fact. It's actually based on some crazy, unrealistic expectation of how people are supposed to look. So accept that. Accept that there is no such thing as ugly. It does not exist. Depending on where you're from, depending on what country, depending on what, where you are from, or what country you live in, or what era we live in, that idea of beauty changes. And so there is no such thing. There is beauty in every unique person in the planet. You just have to know where to look. Know that this can be fixed, but you do have to work on it. It is not going to happen overnight. It doesn't happen through osmosis. As much as I would love to just go, la, 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 now you're free. No, you have to be willing to put in the work to make sure that you get out of this rut of low self-esteem, because it will change your life. Having high self-esteem is awesome. It is so liberating to know that you are exactly the way that you're supposed to be, and it doesn't matter what other people think. That self part, right? Other people's opinions doesn't matter. Other people's perceptions don't matter. I know who I am. I know who I'm, what I am worth. I know what I deserve, and I'm going to go take care of that. I'm going to respect myself enough to make sure that I have what I need and want and deserve. There's beauty there. So keep going for it. Know, and you're going to have to do some introspective work. Don't be afraid of revisiting the past. And once you know where the issue is coming from, you're going to have to action it. So be willing to do that too. So doing the introspective work and then actioning it. Follow through until you see improvements. Do not give up on yourself. It's also important to note that you are not always going to be at high self-esteem the rest of your life. There will always be moments of self-doubt. There will always be moments where you don't feel so hot, and that's okay. But if you know and recognize that this is one of your moments where you're not feeling so great about yourself and you have the tools to work on it, you will. Knowing that it goes up and down. It's a normal part of life. We're not all going to stay at the same level. There's an active growth or active self, improvement that needs to take place. So accept that it's going to change with time and you're going to have to keep it in check. It's your responsibility to just make sure that you keep yourself in check. Okay, so there is a book that was written by Nathaniel Branden, and it's called The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem. Fantastical book. The 6 pillars, funny enough, when I read it, I thought, wow, this actually takes into account not only elements of the world of self-love, but also elements of emotional intelligence. And so I'm going to tell you what the 6 pillars are. If you have an opportunity to get the audiobook or the book, buy the book and read it, it is fantastic. And the tips that he teaches and the explanations are fantastic. And so the 6 pillars to work on, okay? And even if you follow none of the advice that I give here, which are taken from multiple different areas, from personal experience to books I've read, articles I've read, videos I've watched, to tackle that self-esteem issue, because who hasn't struggled with some sort of low self-esteem at some points in their lives? These 6 pillars actually can give you a really good guideline of what areas of your world or your life you should tackle in order to improve or boost your self-esteem. So I'm going to give you the 6. I'll talk briefly about them as I need to, and then we can start talking about ways to fix the self-esteem situation. So the first of the 6 pillars of self-esteem is the practice of living consciously. Okay? The practice of living consciously. This is the awareness of your thoughts and your emotions, your feelings about things. If you are consciously aware of, of yourself on a regular basis, that's a good start to learning to have a little bit more self-esteem, because you understand yourself. So, and again, it reminds me of emotional intelligence and even self-love. In order to love yourself, you've got to know yourself. You have to understand where you come from and who you are in order to accept and love yourself. And the same holds true with developing your emotional intelligence. You have to become self-aware. It is it's one of the most critical elements of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. So be aware of your thoughts and your emotions. The second pillar is the practice of self-acceptance, which is a very beautiful segue from being aware of your thoughts and feelings to knowing that you are who you are and accepting yourself exactly as you are. This is important for, again, both self-love as well as developing emotional intelligence. Accepting yourself exactly as you are is important. And now this is not to be confused with accepting and conforming, because conforming or settling for, oh, well, this is who I am and I'm never going to change, is actually not the point in self-love or in emotional intelligence. And I know that it may sound like it's a paradox, but it's not. Your first step is understanding who you are, where you came from. Accept yourself exactly the way that you are, because it doesn't need to be any different right now. This just is who you are. You can love that exactly in the state that you are, while also continually evolving as a human being, because you love and respect yourself enough to do that. And in developing emotional intelligence, you know that you are never going to be sitting. There is never a point in time where you stop learning. You continually learn and you continually develop and hone your skills, whether it be social skills, internal work, your introspective work. Part of developing both of these is ensuring that you are continually building on the knowledge that you learn, building on the relationship that you have with yourself. Super important. So We've already said living consciously, the practice of living consciously, the practice of self-acceptance. And the next one is the practice of self-responsibility. So it is knowing yourself, accepting yourself, and ultimately knowing where to hold yourself accountable. And that is huge in both self-love as well as emotional intelligence, as well as building your self-esteem. So you see how important these things are. Knowing who you are is at the core of all of this. Don't be afraid to explore who you are, because who you are is going to be amazing. You will see, you will discover your awesomeness and your uniqueness. You were born a particularly unique human being, and you will live your life continually being this beautiful, amazing, wonderful, unique human being. Don't be afraid to explore that. And make sure that you understand that once you know where you came from, accept the fact that oftentimes in life, we're responsible for the outcomes of a lot of the things that happen around us. When you start to become aware of the impact that your emotions or your actions have on other people, you can start to take action on those and say, wow, I realized that when I said that, it had a negative reaction. I don't want to have a negative reaction. Let me own my part in this and learn from it. And so you grow, poof, as a human being, just like that. And so the more you learn about yourself and the more you accept the role that you play in your life, the easier it is to continually evolve as a human being. And that is beautiful. So self-responsibility, the good stuff about yourself, the bad stuff about yourself, you're accountable for a lot of the aspects of your life. Not every single thing, but there are things that you are. And it's okay, because that puts you in the driver's seat. Who doesn't want that? Then there is, talking about the driver's seat, the practice, the fourth pillar, is the practice of self-assertiveness. This is ensuring that your needs, your values, your principles, your ethics, your everything is respected. You assert those aspects of your life. Make sure that you chase your dreams, respecting your dreams. Make sure that you chase the respect that you deserve from other people and not accepting disrespect from other people. So that self-assertiveness plays a part. Living purposefully, that's 5. Okay, we're getting to the end. So the 5th pillar is living purposefully. Okay, this is living with intention, knowing exactly where your goals are, where you want to go, and making sure that you live your life targeting that on a daily basis, honoring that, honoring your purpose in life, whether that is to be a better parent, whether that is to start your own business, whether that is to build a successful career, whether that is to become a better parent, a better daughter, a better whatever. You are living life with intention. And yes, this is a big self-love thing. And living with intention, with that motivation, is also a part of the emotional development as well. The 6th, and final pillar is personal integrity. This is your ability to live up to your own expectations of yourself, leveraging your own promises that you have to yourself, honoring the promises that you make. So if you say, I'm going to start exercising, or I'm going to start eating better or healthier, honoring that promise to yourself because you deserve it. So these are the 6 pillars, or the ways to achieve self-esteem. Each of these areas will be tackled, right? First, starting with living consciously, being aware of your thoughts and feelings, which we're going to talk about. The practice of of self-acceptance, which is accepting yourself exactly the way that you are, understanding and accepting. Then there is making sure that you also are practicing self-responsibility, realizing, recognizing, and identifying areas in your life where you could do better, or areas where, wow, when that happened, I also played a part in that. Self-assertiveness, being able to get, to assert your needs and your wants, and making sure that those things happen for you. Living with purpose, Okay, living with intention, making sure that you are eyeballing that goal and driving to it. And personal integrity, doing all of this while maintaining your beliefs that that these are honorable, doing this the right way, doing the right thing, keeping yourself in check, that you are keeping your promises to yourself. If you can tackle all 6 of these pillars and put into practice some of the tips that are shared in his book, you can absolutely start to build your self-esteem up. And you may have varying degrees. Everyone has a different degree of self-esteem. And as I mentioned earlier, you don't have the same level of self-esteem throughout your entire life. It is perfectly normal for it to fluctuate as things happen within your life. But the key is to ensure that you always bring it back to that healthy place. You don't want to stay stuck in a world where you are at rock bottom and feel really horrible about yourself and lack motivation in a million different ways. No good can come of that place. But if you are aware of how to cultivate it, how to expand and build on that self-esteem, you can actually use some of the tips to continually keep your self-esteem in check. What do these look like? These tips that I am about to share are tips that can be used, across a variety of areas in your life. It isn't just for boosting your self-esteem. It's really getting at the core of who you are, being familiar with your own emotions and your thoughts, which is part of developing emotional intelligence, understanding who you are really through and through, and accepting yourself, which leads to self-love. And so there are clearly various areas where this will benefit your life. It will cause a ripple effect that will impact all aspects. So where do you start? And for those of you who've heard my show before, you know what I'm about to say. Journaling. Just get yourself a notebook. Get it at the pharmacy. You don't need to spend a fortune on a notebook. Just get a cheap little $1 notebook. It's just fine. You just need a spot that you can come back to and not just work on a daily basis, but also reflect on. So you look back on your previous entries. So it's best to keep a notebook instead of just scrap pieces of paper that you'll probably lose track of. And I would even date the pages so that you can see in the, as you move forward, you can start to see how far you've come. Journaling. Okay. Journaling does a couple of things. It is, number one, it puts your thoughts outside of your body. Your thoughts, your beliefs, your recollections are going to be sucked out of your brain and put down on a piece of paper so that you could then observe it. When you can take something outside of your mind and put it down on a piece of paper, it is much easier to observe it. If you leave it in your head, it's very hard to make sense out of the various thoughts that keep coming in because it doesn't really stay still when it's still up here. And so therapists have used this technique for eons. They continue to do it today. If you've ever seen a therapist, they are very likely to have prescribed keeping a journal for various reasons. And journaling can be used for a multitude of things, including revisiting traumas, revisiting your emotions, understanding the decisions that we make, reflecting on our accomplishments, to look back and say, look how far I've come. It can be used to teach us how to treat other people, how to teach us how to teach others how to treat us. It can be used in a million different ways, but for the purposes of building your self-esteem, the very first step before you start anything else, you first have to understand you. It is very, very difficult to feel better about yourself in any aspect if you haven't first stopped to actually get to know you, meet yourself. There was a woman that I saw a video about, and she was talking about a friend of hers that they were discussing other friends and how she admired her other friends and how successful they are and how good looking they are and how amazing they are as people. And she wished that she could be like them. And her friend kind of looked at her like she was crazy and stopped her after she was done giving the speech about how everyone else is better than she is and how she admired all these different friends of theirs and wished that she could have lived a day in their shoes. And her dear friend looked at her and said, have you met you? Because you really should. If you stop for a minute to get to know yourself and actually meet you, you would love that person. She is amazing. She is, impressive, and she is hardworking, and she is committed and compassionate. And she went down this list of, of compliments and of positive things about her dear friend that she had no idea about herself. And it struck a chord with me, because I think that that's one of the things that I have tried very hard. I've had girlfriends that do the same thing. They beat themselves up. They want so badly to have this person's life or have this certain image, depict this sort of, this sort of reality on themselves. And they worry so much about what other people think. And they frequently think that if they've been rejected, that they must not be worthy. And I have literally said, oh my God, have you met you? Have you stopped? Have you ever stopped to look in the mirror and introduce yourself to that person? Because she is amazing. And I want to strangle people that don't see it themselves. But the truth is, we are often so lost in defining ourselves by the way that other people might see us that we completely lose sight of who we actually are. And we have formed this opinion about ourselves based on what is in the media, based on our own observations about what other people may or may not think about us. And we form these stories about who we must be and how not so adequate we are, and how we're not so worthy and we're not so amazing. But if you actually stopped to just shut out the world for a minute, did a little bit of introspective work, and got to know yourself for real, understand where you came from, understand why you made some of the decisions that you made, how far you have come, how much you have survived, how many people you have touched, how many times you came through for yourself in some way or another, you would start to respect that person. You would start to respect the person that you're getting to know, because how can you not? But if we never take the time to get to know ourselves and ask those questions and say and challenge ourselves to go, I always thought that I was just, everything I touched turned to crap, and nothing I did ever turned out okay. But when I really stopped when I wrote it down, and when I started to recognize, okay, this is, I was born on this day, and after that, this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and I started writing my timeline of my life, things started to click. Not only did the timeline of my life explain a whole lot about the decisions that I made as I got older, and as I progressed through life, it started to explain some of the things that I was afraid of. And it started to explain some of the reasons why I was so, focused or determined to do things a certain way. And why I took a left turn at Albuquerque instead of making a right. And so all of these things, as I explored more and more, and I started challenging every single event, every single decision, when I started to go, I got into this weird cycle with people in my life. Why did I do that? And if I really took a look at what happened there, I start to see answers. And when I see answers, I can begin to understand. And when I begin to understand, I can start to accept it for what it was instead of what it should have been. And then I go from accepting it to respecting it. And when I go from respecting it and understanding and looking back at how far I've come, I start to love it. I start to love my own reality, my own image that is true as hell about me. And it doesn't mean that I am, perfect, or that I never made mistakes, or that I am, this person that I have always wanted to be and I just didn't know it. But what it does do is it brings reality into check instead of the fantasy of what I thought. And it started to bring this newfound, once I got to understand why that little girl made those decisions and why the adult, the young woman made some of her decisions, and why she was so afraid, and why she was so eager to do things a certain way, and why she rejected some people when she accepted others, and why some behaviors were repeated throughout her life, and until she figured it out. I started to respect the evolution of who she is today, and that girl is me. And so I didn't even begin to explore whether or not I accepted the way I looked. Because if you notice, everything I just talked about was about the core of me, the core of who she was when she was born, who she became as she got a little bit older, the experiences that she had to endure, the experiences that formed the really wonderful parts of her, the people that influenced her life in good ways and in bad ways, people who still continually influence her life, the decisions that she may have made, good, bad, or ugly. They built the story of who I became, and I wouldn't want it to be any other way. And the core matters the most. If I could get to that point, I know that anybody else can too. I was the kind of person that didn't even want to look in a mirror. I would pass by mirrors and never look at it. I never wore makeup. I barely brushed my hair and put it up in a ponytail, and I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to look. And it wasn't just because I was not okay with what I looked like. I think that I was afraid to see me. And that became very evident as I got older, and as a therapist once told me, you have to look yourself in the mirror. And I thought that was the hardest exercise in the world, looking myself in the mirror, like really looking at myself in the mirror, not just glancing over and saying, oh yeah, I have brown hair. No, really taking a look in the mirror. That was hard. So I get it. I get if you are in a bad place. I understand if you're listening to this episode and you are watching me on my channel to try to find out ways for you to get out of where you are today because you don't like it. You're stuck in this place where you can't get out. I know exactly where you've come from. I know exactly what you're going through because I went through the same thing. And just because the rest of the world saw an image of me doesn't mean that that's who I was. Inside, I was not okay. So I'm a big believer that in order to tackle these pillars of self-esteem, and even if you don't really want to use these pillars as your guide, and you just want to find out what are my quick tips for building my self-esteem. I don't want to have to read a book. I don't want to have to deal with all of this stuff. Well, this is what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to do homework. You're going to have to put some effort into it. It will not happen overnight. You're going to come across a little area in your life when you start going through your self-discovery. You're going to come through areas where you don't want to revisit, and you're going to have to anyway. You're going to need to understand it and ultimately accept it for what it was. You need to be able to explore aspects of your life that may continually play parts in the decisions that you make today. And that is not painless. It can be a little painful. But I know that when I was looking for answers, I was open to the pain because it couldn't possibly be worse than what I was doing with my entire life. So I encourage you to have the courage. Be brave. Explore. Really explore it. do the exercises that I'm about to give you. If you find that it is so painful that you can't tolerate it, I strongly urge you to find a professional, a mental health professional to help you, whether that is a psychologist, whether that's a coach. You can just look for somebody who can walk you through it. Do not sit in your own pain. If the trauma from the past is so bad, you owe it to yourself to explore it. And believe it or not, and I know that everyone just kind of wants to forget the pain because pain is pain and nobody wants to feel it. Unfortunately, the only way to process emotions and the only way to process traumas is to let yourself process it in the first place. And if you keep stopping yourself from processing it, it stays for a long time. It just stays locked up in your body, and it'll just kind of come out to give you red alerts every once in a while. And usually that happens in the most inopportune times. So I urge you to explore that. Your mental health is extremely important. But going back to our self-esteem conversation, for those of us who can go through these exercises, and they may be painful, but you can do it, get to know yourself first. Pick up a journal, no matter how dumb you feel, and listen to my episode on self-awareness. It gives you step-by-step exercises that you can do to start to get to know you. Things like writing down a timeline of your life, right? I think I mentioned that a minute ago, that you go through from birth till the present. What is your timeline of your life? What are all of the important things or events that happened in your life, things that happened throughout your life that had an impact on you? They could be big or small, okay? They could be, parents' divorces. They can be smaller, like I started at a new school. It could be that you enlisted in the, military. It could be that you got married. It could be that you had a child. It could be anything. Okay, whatever those events are, write down that timeline of your life. Take the time to think about the sequence of events that occurred. It can be eye-opening, I promise. It was for me, because I started to really understand the part that some of these things played in my decision-making throughout my life. And I started to see, repetitive cycles of things in my life as well. And had I not done the exercise of the timeline, I probably wouldn't have had it so plain to see. Again, I removed it from my brain and I put it down on a piece of paper. And now I had a little, like the history timelines that you remember from school, write one down just for you. The story of your life. Okay. And once you look at that, your first thing is to understand it. Understand that these are parts of your history. It doesn't mean that it's who you are. These are just things that contributed to some of who you have become. So accept that all of those events are in the past. They already occurred. They are no longer happening today, but they happened in the past. There is definitely always something to learn from those experiences, even if it is to stay away from certain types of situations, even if it is to say, it taught me to appreciate XYZ in life. But there's always a positive takeaway from even the most dire circumstances or the most painful events. We are reminded of something, whether it's a newfound appreciation for, good relationships, whether it is a recognize red flags in the future, all of those things. Write down the list of the things after you've written your timeline. Write down a list of the things that you've learned from these events. What has it taught you as a human being? Are there things that, that you could do differently in the future? I'm not saying you can change the past, because you can't. Remember, the past is behind you. You have to accept it exactly as it is. There is no changing that. As much as we all wish that we could, and we hold on to that hope that we could have changed it, you can't. That is one of the hardest lessons in life, is that you can't change the past. Ain't nothing you can do about it. But you can change what you do moving forward. So if there's anything that you can do, write it down. Like, what can I do changing this moving forward? In the future, I'll be, talk to my children about this sort of thing. And in the future, I'll make sure that I am upfront and honest with my friends in the future. I'll make sure that XYZ, things that you know that you can take with you to make your future a little bit better, safer, more successful. And then leave the past where it is. Accept it for what it was. Take the lessons and move forward with it. The next thing that you can do when you're journaling, as part of your self-discovery, as part of your introspective work, is to list the things that you know to be true about yourself. Again, this is in my previous episode. I get into some painful details about it, so I'm going to kind of brisk through this list a little bit to move on to the next area. But you list the things that you know to be true about yourself. So things that you're good at and things that you could potentially improve on. So it could be anything from I'm very honest, I am, a very giving person, I'm very patient, and it can also include the things that you're not so good at, the things that you can improve a little bit on. Like, I have no tolerance for lazy people. They freak me out, and I have a bad reaction to that. I have a bad temper. When people upset me, I can kind of lose my cool. So write down the things that you know to be true about yourself. Try not to compare yourself to other people. Don't say I'm not pretty, because that isn't a true statement. You can say I don't like the way I look. That can be an accurate statement for right now, but we're going to work on that. You would write down the things that you know to be true. Again, don't compare yourself to other people. At this moment, what you're trying to capture is what the fact of who you are. What are the attributes that contribute to who you are? And then write a list of things that you're proud of. Kind of like a list of accomplishments in life. Whether that's that you graduated from high school, whether you got your degree at a university, whether you're proud to be a parent, you're proud to be a member of the military, you are proud that you took an alternate path in life that led you to happiness or success, that you were brave enough to leave the state, that you were brave enough to move to another country, to explore, whatever it is that you might be proud of within your life, even if it's small, okay? It doesn't have to be the huge stuff. It can be the little things, like I'm proud that I saved up enough money to get myself a car. It could be that I'm proud that I help my son with his homework every night, that I'm home on time to help him with his homework. What is it that you are proud of? And write that down. That is something that you can keep with you on those days where you feel like you've just kind of hit a little bit of rock bottom. Read that list back to yourself. How far have you come? What have you done that you actually are very proud of? It's a very powerful tool to look back on when you need a little pick-me-up. But it also is a reality check in that you aren't all the negative stuff only. You are also a collection of positive things. The next thing that you can do in order to start building your relationship with yourself is to then reflect on it. Observe the information that you've already written so far. Okay, you now know your history. You have your timeline, you have the things that you know to be true about yourself, you have the things that you are proud of, some of the things that you can improve about yourself. Truly observe them and accept. Look at it with compassion. Don't judge yourself for it. Okay? It's not useful to judge yourself and say, oh, I was so stupid, I did that, oh, I shouldn't have, blah, 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 blah. You have to leave the judgments at the door. Do your best to detach from the emotions that are attached to those experiences and simply look at what you've observed. You know what you are, you know what you've been through, you know the lessons that you've learned. Simply look at those and observe them. Accept them as fact that equals you. You do not need to explore how it made you feel at this point, because notice that I'm not even talking about that yet, even though we're going to get to your emotions in a minute. because your emotions are what brought you here in the first place. So I'm not going to ignore them. They're super important. Emotions are everything. But there's a way to read them. So now that you have all of this information and you've been able to observe who you are, how far you've come, how many things you've accomplished, what are the things that you know to be true, where are the areas where you're really good and you're like, yes, I want to keep doing that, and other areas where you can improve a little bit and say, you know what, I need to work on some, my patience, or I need to work on, my temper, because I don't know where my temper comes from. Or maybe you know where your temper comes from and you're just like, wow, I know where it came from. My dad used to have a really bad temper, and that makes sense that I kind of picked up on his inability to process his own emotions. And now I've taken that as one of my things. So as long as you start to look at these things about yourself, you can observe them from a distance, you will start to find how easily you can begin to accept them. These are facts. This is not information that came from anywhere else. It wasn't based on a movie. These are not opinions that somebody else gave you. They're not even your own opinions. These are things that actually are part of you. And now, looking at this list and looking at all of this data, you can observe and see who you actually are. And then I want you to go to the mirror and introduce yourself. I just learned a great deal about this person that is sitting inside my body, this inside my mind. I now know who she is. I really, really kind of understand her. I may not agree with everything that she did, because remember, we're thinking with our today wisdom brains. We weren't that wise back then. We didn't know what we didn't know until we lived through it. So forgive yourself for that. Forgive yourself for knowing, of having a very limited set of knowledge at that time. You had no idea where you were going to end up. But what you do know is you survived it. You managed it because you are standing in front of a mirror looking at the person, the survivor, him or herself. You have done a great deal. You have been through a great deal, and you are strong for it. And you're even stronger having gone through this exercise of getting to know you. You can say, hey, nice to meet you. I understand you now. And simply understanding somebody allows you to accept them as they are. You don't need to be so different right now. Right now, you just needed to get to this point. This is where you're supposed to be right now. There are some things that you're going to continue to work on, because that's what we all do. We evolve. But right now, the person that you are right now makes sense, doesn't it? And that person is worthy of help and compassion. And that understanding with an open heart that you're saying, I get it. I know where you've come from. I see you. I really do. Because I don't know how many people have actually opened their eyes and gotten to know themselves. But this is your time. You've got to do this. Know who you are. Because how can you accept and how can you learn to appreciate and respect a person you don't know? And so that's a big one. Once you have an understanding and an acceptance, and you kind of respect how far they've come, even though, yes, I know that there's always something that we're like, but I still don't like, this, and this. You're going to have to start asking yourself some questions from there. Okay. Cause now you know where you are, you know where your baseline is. Like now I know John Doe, John Doe is now become Jane. And now I can start saying, okay, Jane, how can I do better? What can I change in my life to get to the point to where I have more respect, or I have more acceptance, or I have more appreciation for this. And you can start building on those by baby steps. Okay? Ask yourself, of those things that now you know who you are and where you've come from, what are the things about yourself that you don't like? Now you can explore that. I don't like asking this question before you get to know yourself. Don't do that until you've gone through the self-discovery phase. Once you've discovered yourself and now you get it and you're, I know, ooh, yeah, there was a lot I didn't really notice. Man, that makes sense now. Now you can say, okay, what don't I like about myself for real? What don't I like? And leave the opinion behind when you make this list. Just state the first things that come to mind when you go, what don't I like about myself? Is it, I have acne. I am overweight. I am underweight. I have, a mole I don't like. I have stretch marks. I have, I'm not in shape. I don't have a lot of energy. What are the things you don't like? I'm not successful. I'm not making enough money. I didn't have a college degree. What are those things that when you think about the things you don't like about yourself, what comes up? And write them down. Just a list. Keep it simple. You don't have to go through a whole story. I don't like that one day at band camp. Just leave that stuff behind. Try to focus on the things that are, what are those attributes about you at the core of who you are? Is there something you don't like? What has been causing the low self-esteem? Whenever you just go, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough where? There are areas. It's never just general, I hate myself. It's more like it's these specific things. And maybe it's one or two, and maybe it's several. But whatever they are, just write them down. And ask yourself, look at them. Again, we're observing. We're trying to understand ourselves, right? That's part of this exercise. Ask yourself if any of those things are even true. How many of them have actually been true? And then ask, did other people plant this belief into my brain? Did somebody else teach me that this is the reality of the situation? Or did you come up with that on your own based on observations of some sort? What led you to this belief about yourself? Is it that the media is holding you to a certain standard? Is it that, maybe you lost a relationship and you're just making an assumption that that's probably why they left? Really challenge yourself to understand where these beliefs are coming from. And challenge the belief itself with that answer. Because if it is something that someone told you, you're going to need to ask yourself if just because they told me, does that make it true? Or is it just something that they said in the heat of a moment? Is it something that they said because they lacked maturity? Was it a child that told you that? Were you bullied in school and that's where you heard it from the very first time? Was it maybe a frustrated parent that said something that they regretted or that they never realized could have had long-term effects on you? Ask yourself and challenge the belief. Challenge it for real, because it does you no good to have negative beliefs about yourself unless it's something that A, it's true, and B, I can do something about it. I can improve myself to make it better. I don't have to live with it. Figure that out. Is it true? Where did you get the belief from? And is there challenge the belief itself? Is it really, really, really the reality of the matter? Or is it a perception that I had, an observation that I made from somebody else, an assumption that I made based on X, Y, Z? Ask yourself, question that completely. And then see if there is some sort of positive thing that you can take from it. For every belief, okay, this one is mapped to this person that said it to me, which means that they did say it when they were really angry about something. And I don't know it to be true. I just know that it was painful and it stuck with me. And because now I started to see it too. Okay. You be realistic with yourself. observe, right? We're trying to understand why this is something that's been holding us back so much from finding happiness or success. And then ask if there's something positive that can come from that. Whether that is encouraging me to eat healthier. Is it something that I can go back to school for because I hate that I don't have a degree? Maybe I should go back to school. Maybe it is a relationship with a friend that has always been toxic, and I should probably not be friends with this toxic person anymore. So ask yourself if anything positive can come from this particular belief. Because these beliefs, every single one of the ones that you're writing down, are limiting you some way or another. They're limiting you from believing in yourself, from believing that you can do more, that you can get more out of life, that you can be happy, that you are worthy of respect and happiness, that you have what it takes to be someone you want to be. So challenge every single one of these beliefs. And if there's anything that positive that you can take from them, write that down. Because now this becomes a plan. Now it's not just an assessment about what I believe to be true about myself, but it's like, okay, these are things that I can actually do something about. So now every day, you're going to try to work into your plan how to make it better. And while you're at the mirror, there are some exercises that are, and if you've never heard of, words of affirmation, you should look them up. It is a super simple way of reprogramming your brain into a new mindset. And the way that they work is that you use positive reinforcement on yourself. These are words of affirmation. It's using positive words of positivity. There's statements or words that you kind of repeat to yourself. It is most effective if you say them in the mirror, when you are looking yourself in the eye, and you can use these words of affirmation to say things like, I love and accept you exactly the way you are. Over and over and over again for a solid 2 minutes. And at first, you're not going to believe it. At first, you might even have a hard time saying it to yourself. You may not even like I don't even like standing in front of a mirror. Well, force yourself to do it. This isn't rocket science. It's a super simple thing. You're going to stand in front of a mirror and you are going to say words of affirmation to remind you of who you are and what you feel. I love and accept you exactly the way you are. And you can say it over and over and over again for 2 minutes every day, 2 minutes every day for 2 months. And it has a huge impact. You don't think it will, because it doesn't sound like it's something that's so powerful, but I assure you it is. You have to be brave enough to do it. It is the easiest thing. You don't need to spend a penny. You just need 2 minutes a day. When you get up in the morning and you're getting ready for your day, say it to yourself in the mirror. Now that statement is about self-esteem, right? It is about loving and accepting yourself exactly the way that you are. But you can also use other words of affirmation to breed more positive thoughts about yourself as well. You can remind yourself, I am strong. I am courageous. I am compassionate. I am competent. I am a badass. You can say all kinds of words of affirmation. These are things that are true about you that you will start to, if you repeat it over and over and over again, you start to program your brain into really believing it. You will become more confident. You will become more positive minded. You will start your day with a positive mindset that has a ripple effect in every decision that you make that day. If you don't believe me, try it. Try it and tell me. Anybody who does that for 2 months and has no results, I'd love to hear from you, because it is the hottest thing right now. People are teaching their children to do it for a very good reason. There are little kids that are being told, I love myself, I love my hair, I love my skin, I love, they start to give themselves words of affirmation that the parents are teaching the kids, and it makes an impact. Those kids wholeheartedly believe it. And it isn't just because that they're young and impressionable, but it's because as you say those things, you do believe them because they are true. It's a reprogramming. It's making sure that you don't fall prey to the BS of other people's opinions, because your opinion is the only one that matters. Remember, there is a person, one person, that was there the day that you were born, when you took your first breath, and will be there until the day, every single moment of your life, the good, the bad, the ugly, till the day you draw your last breath. And that person is you. That person deserves understanding, compassion, love from you. That person should be your best friend. The same way that you pick up your best friend when they're crying because somebody just broke up with them and they're feeling horrible about themselves, and you say, no, you are stronger than this. You deserve better than that guy. Screw that guy. You're a goddess. You know what I'm talking about. When you pump up your friend because you're saying, no, I know this to be true about you. You have been there every step of my life. Whenever I needed you, you're an amazing person. You're an amazing girlfriend. Anybody would be lucky to have you. And that is the kind of person that you need to become for yourself. Don't forget that. Don't forget how important it is for you to be there for yourself, because nobody else is guaranteed to be there. Other people can be there through the goodness of their hearts and purity, but you are responsible for you. You were put on this planet for you. This is your life. These are your needs. And you're the one that's responsible for making sure that you get your needs met, that you get your wants, that you bust your butt to be the best version of you from the day you were born until the day you pass. That you have a positive effect on people. And that you can seriously look in the mirror and love what you see, inside and out. So consider that. Consider how you treat yourself. That's one of the biggest things with self-esteem, and how to bring that up. What are you doing for yourself on a daily basis? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you eating well? And no, I'm not talking about getting on a mega super diet. I'm just talking about, do you treat your body well? Do you treat your mind well? When you've had a horrible day and you are at you've reached a boiling point, are you finding a release that is healthy? Are you finding ways to cope with things in a healthy way? Are you surrounding yourself with things that are good for you and people that are good for you? Ask yourself what you're doing for you on a daily basis. What do you do every day? Write it down if you have to. If you're like, I don't know, I guess I kind of do this or that. No, just really ask yourself, what do you do? What have you done for yourself lately? Have you made sure that when you've had a stressful day that you have a moment to recoup? Have you made sure that instead of taking on everyone else's responsibilities and everyone else's chores, that you say, no, guys, I've had it up to here. Your turn. You have to wash dishes today. Have you taken it upon yourself to make sure that you have put that oxygen mask on your face first, so that you can then be stronger and more compassionate toward others? Because I'm telling you, when you don't do that and you feel bleh about yourself, it manifests itself. Other people will see it. Other people feel it. And it's not good for you. You are not taking care of yourself, which, again, remember I just said, your number one responsibility in your life is you. You can't be a good parent until you've helped yourself. You can't be a good nurse until you've cared for yourself. You can't be a good doctor without caring for yourself. You can't be a good partner to someone else if you're not bothering to take care of yourself. You've got to put your oxygen mask on your own face first, Always, always, always. That should go without saying. And now what are your goals? Okay, so now we've done a lot of introspective work, which I'm a huge fan of. What are your goals as part of this self-discovery? What are the things that when you were a little kid, you wanted to do so badly? And as you got older, maybe the dream kind of went away because you felt like it was a little too hard for me to do. I don't know. Life gets away from me. I ended up with kids. I guess dreams have to go somewhere else. And, what are those goals? Are you working toward them? Are they feasible at all? Is it something that you can actually get started on? Is it something that maybe you should revisit? Because there should be a plan. There should be something to look forward to. And that could be a vacation in Japan next year, or maybe in 2 years. And you need to save up for it. But what are your goals? What are the hopes and dreams that you have for yourself that you were like, man, if I had a bucket list, bucket lists are the best. I mean, when you think about what a bucket list is, it isn't just a dream list. It's a list of, I've got to do these things before I go. And that's so beautiful. That is absolutely taking care of yourself. So do that. Don't be afraid to write down what those goals are. What are those things that you want to accomplish in life? And see if you can build a plan to getting those things accomplished. What is it going to take? How can I do a little bit at a time? Do you maybe need a little bit of a part-time job or a summer job to kind of get that extra money to save for something? Or is it starting a new business and maybe you need to go back to school to get a little bit more of an education on that or get certified? What are the things that you can do to try to get yourself from where you are right now to where you actually want to be? What is in your future? Don't just think about today. Think about the life you are about to build, because once you have high self-esteem, take on the world. Why not? Another thing that you can do is read biographies on your role models, on the people. Who is it that you kind of want to be like? And buy a biography on them. Read it. Get an audiobook if you don't like reading. You don't have time to sit down and read a book. You can listen to them on your headphones. You can listen to it in your car as you're driving to work. But learn about the struggles that other people that are like you have had. Success doesn't typically happen overnight unless you're winning a lottery. A lot of people that we have admired, everyone from Oprah Winfrey to Will Smith to, The Rock to, whatever celebrity you're like, oh, I admire them. They have been through quite a bit in their lives and they've had to overcome a lot to get to where they are. So learn about it. Consider learning about their history. It may be an eye-opener for you. You may start to realize, oh my God, they're not that far from where I am. I could still do this. Give yourself a little boost, of a push of energy, because you don't have to start with everything in order to keep it. You can start with nothing and build your way up. It's kind of the American dream, isn't it? Okay, and lastly, okay, but just to close this up, the very last one, and I know I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I want to make sure that if you need it, you should definitely get help if you are having such a hard time looking past. If these tips become too painful, I would urge you to try it. If you get to the point where these exercises have done, that you feel like you can't get past some of the painful ruts that you've put down that journal and decided never to pick it back up because it was just too much, you should definitely try to enlist the help of a professional. There are a lot of affordable people online nowadays. Just try to look for the right credentials, ask for reviews, find recommended, there are life coaches online that can help walk you through some of these traumas if it's so painful that you need to revisit it. And get yourself to the point to where you're healthy. Prioritize your health. It's so important. And now I will wrap up the show. Before I go, just really quickly, I've been there. I have had to deal with, my own traumas in my life. I've had to deal with, stupid decisions, bad decisions, whatever decisions. And now, after going through these exercises, after revisiting a lot of my story and about where it came from, once I understood, it changed my whole life. It changed everything for the better. It changed every relationship that I had with other people. It changed the way that I saw myself, of course. But it's that ripple effect I talked about. It's this beautiful, sparkly, ripple effect that touches everything in my world. And it is only because I stopped to take a moment, rather than looking at the outside for my own, for affirmations outside of myself. I started looking internally. I invested the time in doing words of affirmation. I invested the time into journaling. I invested the time into even talking to a therapist. I invested in my mental and emotional well-being. I read every book on the subject that I could get my hands on. It piqued my interest in learning so much about me that I felt unstoppable. You can do this, you can do this too. Throughout this entire exercise, everything that you do, be kind to yourself, be compassionate. Consider that person that really just needs your understanding and needs your acceptance and needs your love. I will see you guys again soon for my next episode. In the meantime, be kind to yourself always.